Russia has a fatal flaw. Russia knows it, Ukraine knows it, and there's nothing that Putin can do about it now that Ukraine has identified that flaw and is exploiting it to the maximum. This is Russia's kill switch, and it's so simple yet so effective that Ukraine can keep on pressing it to win the war. That's exactly what Ukraine has been doing. Oil burns and Russia bleeds, and no matter what Putin tries, it's only going to get worse from here. We take you to Krasnodar Krai, on Russia's Black Sea coast. Often a target due to its proximity to Ukraine's borders, Krasnodar Krai also happens to be home to the Tuapse oil terminal. That terminal is one of Russia's most important export hubs, as tankers from the Shadow Fleet use it to stock up and then sail out with oil that is sold to nations all over the world. At its peak, Tuapse is capable of processing about 12 million tons per year via its terminal infrastructure and the refinery that is built into the facility. But Tuapse is nowhere near its peak right now. Ukraine has made sure of it, as it's exploiting a fatal flaw in Russia's defenses to hit Tuapse over and over again. On May 1st, Ukrainian drones flew into the airspace above the Tuapse terminal. Having traveled hundreds of kilometers to get there, those drones weren't on a sightseeing trip. They came to destroy, and that's exactly what they did as they crashed down into the terminal. Massive blazes were reported, toxic black smoke went flying into the sky, and according to The Guardian, Russian oil leaked out of storage facilities. But this was no one-off strike. Frankly, Russia should have been used to what Ukraine was doing, as the May 1st attack was the fourth separate strike in a 16-day blitz against this particular terminal. The Kyiv Independent reports that these repeated attacks have caused days-long fires, as Ukraine has found the kill switch and keeps on pushing. Refinery operations have been stopped in their tracks, and Russian oil exports aren't making it out into the Black Sea. But the real problem for Putin is this: Russia's air defenses have failed to stop any of these Ukrainian assaults. The big question is why? The answer lies in a fatal flaw in Russia's entire air defense network that we'll be exploring soon. That flaw also means that Ukraine's multi-hit against Tuapse is far from isolated. If Russian oil is the kill switch, Ukraine is trying to take as much of it as possible out of commission. In April alone, Ukraine struck 14 Russian refineries and key oil hubs throughout Russia, the Kyiv Post reported on May 4th. From the Republic of Bashkortostan, where a refinery that is 1,400 kilometers away from Ukraine was hit, through to the Baltic Sea oil port hubs in Ust-Luga and Primorsk, which themselves have been the victims of repeated strikes, Ukraine's drones fly high, hit hard, and somehow manage to overcome Russia's air defenses. This is a concerted campaign, with April alone seeing Ukraine hit a 4-month high in terms of its oil strikes, per Bloomberg. Ukraine isn't doing all of this for no reason. What Ukraine sees in Tuapse and Russia's many other refineries and oil terminals is the key to winning the war. A wholesale shift of the battlefield momentum in Ukraine is being built on the back of strikes like these, and there is a clear logic behind everything that Ukraine is doing. The kill switch has been found, and this is why it matters. Not all that long ago, Ukraine found itself conducting isolated strikes against Russia's oil refineries and terminals. Those strikes were effective. They damaged equipment and caused fires. However, Ukraine quickly discovered that single strikes weren't enough to take out entire facilities. They couldn't be. Russia's oil infrastructure is sprawling, and it would take a flurry of incredibly powerful missiles to take it all out in one attack. Ukraine didn't have missiles that it could unleash in such large numbers. But what it does have is the ability to launch large numbers of drones, repeated over multiple strikes, that take out Russia's oil infrastructure piece by burning piece. We started to see hints of this new strategy coming to the fore in 2025. According to the Moscow Times, Ukraine carried out 120 attacks on Russian energy facilities, with oil refineries accounting for 81 of those attacks. Russia lost an estimated $13 billion in oil revenue due to Ukraine's new strategy, which typically involved hitting an oil facility and then waiting for several weeks or even months before hitting it again. The idea of repeatedly hitting the kill switch was starting to take shape. Every time Russia managed to complete repairs, more Ukrainian drones would fly. However, the repetition wasn't fast enough. That's what changed in 2026. Tuapse being hit 4 times in 16 days is a ridiculous statistic, but it's something that makes complete sense, as the executive director of the Ukrainian Center for Security and Cooperation, Dmytro Zhmylo, says. Blunter than a broken pencil, Zhmylo says, why was it hit again? Because it was not fully destroyed, when speaking about Tuapse. That, in a nutshell, is the crux of Ukraine's current campaign. Rather than attempting to destroy Russia's oil facilities in one shot, which is something that simply isn't possible even with the most precise strikes, Ukraine instead gradually degrades the output of these facilities until it reaches zero. The added benefit of this repeated pushing of the kill switch is the fear that it creates. Imagine that you work at one of the refineries or oil terminals that Ukraine is hitting. You've just been forced to stay away for several days while a fire is put out. Then, within days of the last drone strike, there's another. Then, days later, yet another. And another. Sooner or later, you're going to start wondering if turning up for work is even worth it at all. Right now, it might be oil that's burning, but if it's not your day, it could be you who goes up in flames during the next drone strike. This sort of psychological pressure may end up doing as much damage to Russia's oil industry as the strikes themselves. And that leads us nicely into why Ukraine has identified Russia's oil infrastructure as the factor that could win the war. There are two reasons: money and frontline troops. The latter is the easier of the two to explain. Some of the oil that is being refined at facilities like Tuapse ends up in the hands of Russian soldiers on the front lines in Ukraine. Tuapse, being a Black Sea port, is especially important, as that means it also offers a direct link to the Ukrainian mainland. Each time it takes some of Russia's oil facilities offline, Ukraine disrupts the flow of gasoline, diesel, aviation fuel, and other oil-based products to Putin's patsies on the front. We're seeing the effects in Ukraine. On April 29th, United 24 media reported that Russian vehicles have been brought to a standstill in the Kherson region due to a growing fuel shortage that is being exacerbated by Ukrainian strikes on Russian oil in the Crimean region. It doesn't take a genius to figure out why this is bad for Russia. No vehicles being available means that Russian soldiers have to launch their assaults on foot. That makes them even easier pickings for Ukraine's drones than they would be if they were in larger armored vehicles and tanks. Plus, a lack of fuel means that Russia can't launch the sorts of large mechanized assaults it needs to make true operational gains at a pace beyond the glacial rate of advance that we're now seeing in Ukraine. As for the monetary side of things, the general impact of Ukraine's kill switch pushing can be explained in simple terms. Less oil sold also means less money that Putin can pump into the Russian war machine. It's fair to say that Russia has had some mixed fortunes with selling its oil in recent months. Iran's blockade of the Strait of Hormuz in the wake of the launch of Operation Epic Fury has been effective enough to mostly shut off a waterway that is responsible for 20% of the world's oil supply. Oil prices have taken a predictable turn as a result. Those prices have been bouncing around the $100 per barrel mark. They experienced another surge on May 11th, following US President Donald Trump's announcement that he would not accept Iran's latest proposal to end the war in the Gulf. Russia should be experiencing a nice boost in revenue from its oil sales due to the rising prices, and to an extent it has been. The Financial Post reports that there has indeed been a jump in how much Russia is able to charge for a barrel of oil. However, that jump hasn't been anywhere near enough to allow Russia to make a dent in its growing budget deficit, which the outlet reports has reached $79.5 billion above Russia's 2026 projections during the first 4 months of the year. That isn't good. Nor are there many other financial issues that are affecting Russia as Ukraine keeps on pounding away at facilities like Tuapse. On May 1st, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky claimed that Russia's strikes during the first 4 months of 2026 have cost Russia $7 billion so far. That's more than halfway toward the 2025 total in about a third of the time, which is indicative of how much Ukraine has been ramping up its repeated strike strategy. Russia also finds itself in the interesting position of having been able to raise its projections for oil and gas revenue due to what's happening in Iran, only to end up missing those projections. The Moscow Times reports that Russia generated $11.47 billion in oil and gas revenue in April. That's a high figure, sure, but it's only $280 million above the baseline level that is calculated using a budget price of $59 per barrel. Russian oil, even with sanctions in place, has been selling for more than that price for a couple of months now. So Russia's oil revenue, which is only just crawling above what's expected at $59 per barrel, shows us that Ukraine is cutting Russia's ability to sell its energy products substantially. By now you get it. Ukraine hitting the Russian kill switch over and over amounts to repeated strikes on oil facilities that takes money out of Putin's war chest and cripples his soldiers on the front. But behind these problems lies a bigger issue, and it's one that Russia can't solve: the fatal flaw that is making all of this possible. Before we reveal what that flaw is, this is a reminder that you're watching The Military Show. If you're getting insight from the channel, make sure you subscribe, as we break it down like this every single week. The fatal flaw is simple. Russia has a huge air defense dilemma, and there isn't a thing that Putin can do to fix it. What has for so long been one of Russia's strengths when it comes to defending its territory against invaders has morphed into its worst weakness when dealing with Ukraine's airstrikes. Russia is simply too big, which means that its air defense infrastructure is stretched so thin that what it's installed at its oil facilities isn't enough to stop Ukraine's drones. That issue is compounded by the fact that Russia has oil refineries and terminals all over the country. So let's assume that Russia moves air defenses to Tuapse to guard against Ukraine's repeated strikes. Fine. Ukraine will just pick another target and hammer it until Russia is forced to move its defenses again. In fact, we've already seen this happening. Ukraine battered Primorsk and Ust-Luga toward the end of March and into April. Now it's letting up on those ports a little and smashing Tuapse, likely because Tuapse is the weakest target that Ukraine can pick off. This entire dilemma stems not only from Russia's size, but also from how its entire air defense setup works. Russia's air defenses are designed in such a way that they provide a layered approach to tackling air defense. There are long, medium, and short-range systems in play, all concentrated in the same area to create a dense layer of protection that raises the chances of interception. That's all well and good. Layered air defenses make sense. The problem is that this overlap is difficult to maintain over as much territory as Russia has. Some would say it's even impossible, as Russia would need to have tens of thousands of air defense systems in place to provide the level of protection that all of its oil facilities and military infrastructure really need. Russia doesn't have enough air defense systems, along with the associated radars and other equipment required to make those defenses effective. So what does it have instead? Layered defenses that are concentrated around what Russia thinks might be the next target that Ukraine tries to hit. All that Ukraine has to do is hit another target and Russia is forced into a dilemma. Does it maintain the layers elsewhere, or does it try to disperse its air defenses to offer wide coverage while sacrificing the dense protective approach that actually works? Choosing the latter leaves targets completely exposed, which makes Ukraine's drones unstoppable, whereas the former offers some protection to as many targets as possible, but that protection is much weaker than it would otherwise be. Rock, meet, hard place. Putin is stuck either way. Ukraine has been taking advantage of this issue with its oil strikes, in particular because attacks against oil facilities deliver more bang for the drone buck. If Ukraine sends 10 drones to Tuapse, and only 2 get through, for instance, those drones are still likely to hit oil facilities that burst into flames. Those flames spread, and more can get burned up than Ukraine managed to hit with its drones. Spreading fires and secondary explosions do the work that Ukraine's off-target drones don't manage. Russia doesn't help itself by following Putin's crazy orders. For example, ahead of Russia's May 9th Victory Day parade, Putin ordered the air defense rings around Moscow to be reinforced. That's according to Zelensky, who United 24 Media reports, also pointed out that those defenses had to be reinforced by Russia pulling air defense systems from other regions to protect Moscow. Essentially, Putin is making sure that he is safeguarded from drones, but he's letting even more of Russia burn to ensure that protection. That's not all. Russia understands its own fatal flaw and is somehow making it even worse by using the wrong air defense systems in the wrong places. According to Justin Bronk, who is a senior research fellow at the Royal United Services Institute, a RUSI think tank, Russia is increasingly relying on medium and long-range surface-to-air missile systems to deal with Ukraine's drones, and it's backing those systems with choppers that are trying to intercept Ukraine's drones directly. What Russia should be using, Bronk claims, are Pantsir systems that might stand a better chance in the air defenses it's using. That may help explain why Ukraine continues to penetrate defenses around facilities like Tuapse, Bronk says, with the implication being that Ukraine can land its repeated strikes because the defenses in Tuapse aren't built to deal with what Ukraine is sending out. Speaking of RUSI, the think tank also made an interesting prediction back in September 2025. RUSI's Dr. Jack Watling said in September that Russia was due to almost run out of its air defense missiles by February, which could provide Ukraine with a window of opportunity to smash more targets on the Russian mainland. By the end of April, Business Insider was reporting that Russia did indeed have a shortage of air defense missiles, which Ukraine has been compounding by intensifying its drone strikes. Even more of Russia's missiles have to be expended to stand any chance of taking out Ukraine's unmanned aerial vehicles. Watling ended up being right on the money. It's no coincidence that Ukraine was able to hit Russia's Baltic seaports repeatedly in March, and that it's done the same to Tuapse in a 16-day onslaught. Russia is defending these facilities with stretched air defenses that rely heavily on missiles that Russia no longer has in its stockpiles. Did we say that Russia had a fatal flaw? Perhaps we should have said several, all related to the terrible state of its air defenses. Russia is too big for the layered defenses it wants to use to be installed at all of its military and energy sites. Those defenses are now being stretched to the point where Russia is using the wrong systems to guard against Ukraine's drones. And those systems are made less effective by a missile drought that is really starting to bite as Ukraine ramps up the volume, depth, and power of its airstrikes. And it's all just going to get worse. Russia's air defense woes are partially self-inflicted, but we also can't discount the impact of a concerted campaign that Ukraine has waged against those defenses, both in the occupied regions and in Russia itself. According to the Kyiv Independent, Ukraine conducted 492 strikes against Russian air defense infrastructure between June 2025 and early March 2026. Even the strikes that took place in the occupied territories fed into the air defense problem in the Russian mainland, as Putin would be forced to decide whether to send more systems into Ukraine or potentially sacrifice the territory those systems guarded by keeping Russia's defenses inside Russia. Since the beginning of the invasion, Ukraine's Ministry of Finance says that Ukraine has destroyed 1,373 of Russia's anti-aircraft warfare equipment. It isn't slowing down on the strikes either. In a May 11th report, United 24 Media revealed that Ukraine had taken out $131 million of Russia's air defenses in just 7 days, as Buk M3 and Tor M2 fell to strikes, alongside radar stations and a Tu-S6 Tunguska anti-aircraft system. What all of this means is that Ukraine is taking out air defenses faster than Russia can build them. But hey, we guess that's one way to overcome a missile shortage. Let Ukraine destroy so many systems that you suddenly have enough missiles left to stock the air defenses that remain, and that's one problem solved. Sarcasm aside, Ukraine is leaning into Russia's fatal flaw. The economic and material losses that result from the pressure are compounding a battlefield situation that absolutely isn't going Russia's way. And as for Tuapse, one of two things is going to happen. Either it will burn again due to Russia still not being able to defend it, or Russia will put defenses in place only to watch as Ukraine's drones start hitting another refinery or terminal over and over. The kill switch has been found, and Putin can do nothing to stop Ukraine from pressing that switch as many times as it wants. What we're now seeing is a new phase of the Ukraine war unfolding, as the momentum shifts and Russia's oil infrastructure burns. No matter where you look in Russia, Ukraine is unleashing a firestorm that can't be stopped. We covered a series of attacks back in April that are part of Ukraine's new strategy, and you can find out all about them by watching our video. And if you enjoyed this video, hit subscribe so you can keep up with all of our analysis of the latest developments in the Ukraine war, and thank you for watching.